Hello there. We've talked about the need for analysis. Now let's take a few minutes and talk about a living situation. I was teaching at Purdue as a nuclear engineer, and I got interested in why it was that people didn't like nuclear power, or what were they concerned about, what we should do to ameliorate those concerns. And a whole series of events as a consequence of going around the state and talking to people through the Cooperative Extension Service. That led to me and two people I got from the Indiana University. We went down and talked to a group of people on the Ohio River near Madison, Indiana, and people from Kentucky on the other side of the river who had a company called Save the Valley Incorporated. They had formed this because they were concerned about the number of power plants that were going to be built along the Ohio River and how those were going to affect their lives, both in pollution and aesthetically, because, power plants are big and they got smokestacks and everything. And it turned out Madison, Indiana, has a power plant called Clifty Creek. It was one of the biggest coal-fired power plants in the world. Its stacks are tall. If you're driving south in Indiana, before you get to the river valley, you'll see these stacks peeking up over the horizon. They're so tall. And that was built partly to supply the uranium enrichment needs because that required a lot of energy. It took about 25 to 20% of all the electricity produced in the United States at the time that was going full bore. And they said, look, we've got power plants here, and we love our river valley, and we don't want any more, or at least let's have something to say about how that can take place. So Senator Birch Bayh at that time, who was in the U.S. Senate and from Indiana, asked the president of Purdue to help them, and the president sent me down, and we got the people from Indiana, and we worked with them. And out of that came an organization, analysis activity that was called the Ohio River Basin Energy Study. And we're going to talk about that and how it went, how we organized, and review some of the findings to give you a feeling for what a technology assessment does and the kind of information you get from it. You can certainly understand the pollution aspect of it. You could understand the fact that some people were happy there was going to be the building of these power plants because of the additional taxes that were available to the various counties so they could make better schools, they could have better roads and other infrastructural issues. However, all in all, the community said, hey, we've got enough stuff going on down here. Put your power plant someplace else. Is that possible? What are the other options? And most of the stuff was going to be coal-based anyway. Just to give you a feeling for how I was struck by this, I was asked to go down to a small college on the river and put a seminar on energy together, and I was hosted by the head of English department. Well, it turns out that at that part of the Ohio River, it's very hilly and very pretty, and some people say it looks like the Rhine in Europe. Well, anyway, in the afternoon, the gentleman who was the head of the English department took me out on a bluff overlooking the river. And when you looked out there, you couldn't see anything but trees and hills and water, and it was very pretty. And he said to me, Bob, you realize this scene is exactly what the Native Americans were looking at hundreds of years ago? It hasn't changed. It was just like this. Do you think it has any value that we preserve this scene? In other words, is there value in maintaining a certain aesthetic? Well, I got to tell you, as an engineer, before I got involved in all this, oh yeah, but something else will come along. Don't worry about it. But to these people in this town, that was very important. And to other people along the river, they liked their bucolic lifestyle. They liked the scenery. They didn't want that disrupted. Now, it turned out that one of the scenes further down the river from where we were, but still within the horizon in our view, an electric company in Indiana was planning to put a nuclear power plant. That would be good. There's no smoke or anything coming out of it. And they said they would try to build it so it blended into the scenery as best as possible. But, with a big facility like that, that's not easy to do. So, to further understand and respect and appreciate and empathize with these folks, the three of us, they said, why don't you come with us? We'll get on a boat and we'll give you a tour down the Ohio River so you can see what it is we value. We said, fine, that's great. So we got in the boat, we were going down the river, and there was a bunch of citizens that formed this group on the boat. And one of them was a lady who happened to have the farm that was sold to the electric company that we're going to build a nuclear power plant. And she says to me, I'm all for nuclear power, but I got to tell you something. I heard that if you're exposed to radiation and if you have a skin problem, chances of getting cancer is going to increase. And I said, well, I suppose that's true. And she says, well, I went to the electric company and I said, well, what about this? Can you tell me anything about it? And their response was, well, that isn't required in the licensing process to build that plant. And we really aren't going to answer it. And basically go away, you bother me. And if you want to argue about it, well, here's a report that's 2 feet high that was produced with many thousands of dollars by an architectural and engineering firm, which is called a safety analysis report. And you can use that to make your case in the court hearing that will result in whether or not we get our site license to build this plant. Well, she was incensed. And I must say I was kind of disturbed by the way she got pushed around. Well, it just took a series of things like this to make us kind of understand why these people were concerned and wanted to, hey, let's have some kind of analysis here so we can see if there are other options than building the plants on the river, and if they were built, what would be the consequences. Fortunately, they had formed this organization, and they had an industrialist who was a member who, as a matter of fact, made a lot of money in injection plastic molding. And he said, oh, come on, let's all fly to Washington, D.C. We'll go see our senator and talk to him about it. Well, people in Congress are interested in what their constituents have to say, and he had an environmentalist bent anyway, and that's why he got the University of Purdue, because he had a son there, to help these people out, Purdue and Indiana. Well, the next thing we did was we talked to these people, and we said, we could do that study, and we went to him, and we pulled together through the Water Resource Research Center network that exists with all land-grant colleges, universities from Illinois, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and the western part of Pennsylvania. And as a team, we went to D.C., Washington, and we said, would the government be willing to financially support such a study? Which they did. And it was a wonderful thing. As a consequence, that's why I ended up at Ohio State. That's another story. But what it did was it showed that indeed you didn't need to build all the power plants on the river. You could build them inland, away from the river, and they'd be just as effective. It gave an example of a social impact assessment because we had a lot of public hearings and people were involved and all the rest and voicing their opinions. That, to me, personally, the most important thing was, besides all that, it gave the citizens in that area the data they needed so they could carry on a balanced, level playing field discussion with the people that wanted to build the power plants. They were on somewhat equal footing if it ever came to adjudication of any kind. They had the numbers, they had the ammunition, they had everything equivalent to what the utilities had, so there could be a balance in the discussion between the two because there was kind of equal data footing. And that's good, and that's what we need more of. And so next time we get together, we're going to talk about that study and how we put it together and look at some of the results.